As adults, we pretty much have rules and defined ways of doing just about everything. So hello, everybody. This is Nanette Saylor here again for another episode of the Create, Play, Live podcast. And today we have a special treat because Amy McNamara, my guest, is actually physically here with me.
I am really here.
Yes. And we are doing, for the first time, a recorded interview on video and here together. So Amy doesn't live where I live, and so it just has happened that she was in the area and we're able to do this. We've been planning this for a while and we just couldn't get our schedules together to sync up and to do it remotely.
So we had to do it in person.
Absolutely.
That was the plan.
Yes.
We just didn't know it.
Exactly. Yes. Somehow we were led to this being the way that this is going to happen. So Amy is an artist and lots of other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
We connected through a retreat and got to know each other a little bit in a community of other creatives. And we have discovered that we have a lot of the same ways of thinking about things in the world. And I am particularly excited about this conversation because I think that this will be a little bit different than some of the ones that I've had so far.
We'll see.
Yes, because the creative process for all of us, as I'm discovering the more of these that I do, is informed so much by, our own way of just moving through life. Mm-hmm. And what I have come to appreciate is that allowing my curiosity to lead me is the thing that fuels and sparks joy in my life and super cool, fun, exciting connections like this one, right? By simply following some breadcrumbs, I ended up connected to a community that Amy was a part of. We both then followed the breadcrumbs to go to a retreat, neither of us really knowing what we were getting into when we went. No idea, right? And
shout out to Stella Orange.
Yes, absolutely. Shout out to Stella, who put together a retreat. And she will admit she didn't really even know what she was going to be up to,
Yes.
right? And we all somehow said yes, showed up, had a super cool experience, enlightening, fulfilling, all of those things.
I lost my keys.
Yes.
In a hole, and they live in Buffalo now, in a hole in Buffalo. So
yes.
Yeah, that happened.
Yes. And we got to enjoy the story of Amy's keys getting lost in the hole through sketches that she did about the keys.
Yes, it was quite a process.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to open this up by inviting Amy to share with us the beginning of your journey as a creative.
Okay.
And what sparked that piece of you, do you think?
Well, I think it was just having tools, really, people ask me, how did I start making art? And it really was, scissors, pencil, paper, as simple as, I have early memories of sitting on my great grandmother's lap and she was showing me how to draw 3D houses on a steno pad.
Ah, interesting.
And how she would draw Christmas trees with her pen. And, so she must have saw something in me that, that I was curious about how to, pens and paper work together.
Yes.
And I was little, like 3 or 4, even earlier, maybe, I don't know. So I always say I've been drawing since I could pick up a pencil.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, and I love, one of the things I really enjoy about what Amy's doing now is that she has these time-lapse videos of her art making, and they're delightful and lovely. And how many of them have you done now?
Oh my goodness. Well, I started the project in 2017. It was a daily drawing challenge. And I had picked my word of the year, which was share. And so those two things sort of clicked in my mind. I said, oh, I'm going to do a daily drawing challenge. And I picked share. And I thought, well, I'm going to share
my daily drawing
every day. And I shared it on social media, because at the time social media had kind of become sort of a dark place. It was very political, and there was just a lot of ugliness, in my opinion, being shared. And just, I really enjoy social media. So I was like, well, what can I contribute to make this fun? And so I said, well, I'm going to share my drawings every day. And at that point I was just sharing the finished drawing. I wasn't doing the time lapse. And I don't know at what point I started doing the time lapses, but I got kind of curious. I've always been curious about my process, and process in art has always been really important to me. So the time lapse was really for my own selfish reasons. I wanted to see what the heck I was doing when I dropped out into that sort of, that flow space.
Yes.
Because I don't know, I think maybe many artists might relate to, once you get into that place of flow, you don't really know what you're doing. You're being informed, but you're sort of, there's no time. You're just in it. And
isn't that interesting that you got curious enough about your own process to say, let's see if I videotape this, what's going to happen, what I might learn or what I might see.
Right.
Interesting. So what did you see?
So, I honestly, what I saw was someone who, I do all of my drawings in pen. I don't use a pencil unless someone commissions me. I usually use a pencil just to make sure I've got the different points mapped out on my drawing, and use that as a guide. But when I draw for myself, I use a pen. And so I saw someone who was willing to make a mistake and work with that. So there's a lot of confidence in my style.
Yes.
And I think that adds
Did that surprise you?
I think to be able to observe it.
Okay.
I don't know if it surprised me. It was more like a reminder, maybe, or a rediscovery.
Okay.
That, oh yeah, I do know what I'm doing. So I've always had a lot of confidence around my art, which I'm really lucky to have. That's always been something that I've just done for myself. I even went to college. Ended up getting a degree in art. But it was always through the lens that this was something that I enjoyed. So I did it for myself. I never expected really to make a living with it or do anything like that. It just was, drawing and painting were always something that I did for myself. So I really made the time-lapse videos to sort of entertain myself, I think, with my drawing and see my process. And then with my word of the year, share, I said, well, I'm going to share it. And I shared all of them, whether I liked them or not.
Yeah. And that's an interesting practice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's so interesting. The ones that I really love, I ended up doing, I think, 307 out of the 365, which brought me to like about November. And in my life, November and December get really busy because of holidays, and I have a family, and it just is not, and it's just not a very, I don't necessarily want to be creative in art making at that time of the year, which that's another thing that I learned through a 365 process.
Yes.
This is what I like to draw. These are the colors I like to use. I live in New England, so we have the 4 seasons.
Yes.
And so, interestingly enough, I really like to draw spring and summer type colors. I don't enjoy depicting fall, even though I find it very beautiful.
Yes.
It's just not something that appeals to me right now. So anyway, I'm off into another tangent, but it's you learn a lot when you have that practice. And then I think the big thing I got from that was just to keep producing, just keep putting it out there.
Yeah.
And so interesting to see that the drawings that I really found I really liked, people, liked them okay. But the ones that I thought were kind of ugly or, ooh, why did I draw that?
Yeah.
Those were the ones that they liked. So it's like, figure that out.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. Another reminder that everybody sees through their own lens.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's very freeing, has been my experience too. I can't say I've ever done 307 in a row. I'm lucky to get, I will admit, I'm not sure I've ever done 30 days in a row.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things for me, in my experience of observing my own process and coming to terms with the things that I want to evolve for me as a creator. One of the things that I've really come to recognize is that for so long, I lived with the identity that said, if you had ritual or practice or things that would be rote, these routine, ordinary, now we start to go down all the negative nuances of that process. I had serious resistance to that. And I used to proudly declare that I never got out of bed the same way twice, right? And that was sort of my identity at some level. And what I've come to really appreciate, the more I study for myself, my own practices and where I'm successful and where I'm not, and studying so many other creators and having conversations with people like you, what I've learned is that the practice, it's only in the practice that we have those evolutionary moments of the amazing download and the inspiration that comes in the middle of us continuing to create whatever that looks like. And it doesn't have to look the same. So for me, I create in lots of different ways.
Right.
So I end up, one of the things I had to come to terms with was, okay, so if you're not doodling every day, does that mean you're not creating every day?
Right.
And giving myself permission to say, well, it doesn't have to look a particular way.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And I think that, so I took the 365 challenge, and that actually doesn't mean that I drew every day.
Yes.
Even though I was sharing every day.
Yes.
So many times, because of my lifestyle, and at the time I was homeschooling our daughter, I had Tuesdays.
And that was it.
And so I would do many times 7 drawings on a Tuesday because I draw really quickly. And for me, I'm sort of I don't know if extreme is the right word, but I like to just immerse myself in something. And so to have an expansive time where I could just get into the flow of it, that works really well for me.
Nice.
And so, but then I had this cache of drawings, pictures and videos, that I could then, each day my practice became to share those methodically.
Yes. Okay.
And so that was also an expression of my process.
Yes.
So a re-examination, looking back over the videos. Okay, how do I want to share this? What do I want to say about it? So, and I think that, we can get kind of like, well, this is how it has to look. And that was a process that worked for me for that year. And then it started to shift. And of course, my audience, and having conversations with my audience, and they got really excited. Oh, are you going to do it again next year? Yeah. And I thought, well, let me try. And I did. And it just didn't stick the same way, because I, was at a different place.
Yes.
On the path.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's really important to not get into that judgy place of this is how it worked before. It's an old form.
Why isn't it working now this way?
Yeah. So, I've received a lot of grace somehow in this process.
Nice.
And things just aligned I love the conversations that my artwork brings up when I talk to people, when I see them on the street and say, oh, I saw your drawing and it reminds me of this, or, all those different conversations are really, that's where it's at for me. I am a social person. I like to talk about, I like to hear what other people have to say, how they're experiencing it.
Yeah, interesting. So share with our audience, because not everyone has seen your style and nor have they seen the subject matter.
Sure.
Share with us a little bit about how you came to do the kinds of drawings that you do, because I think that that really will help people understand how they do spark conversation.
Yes, absolutely. So through the 365 prompts, I think I got around, it was number 42. So I think that got me into February. And one of the prompts was landmark. And in my town, we have a Dairy Queen, which is a soft serve ice cream place. I don't know if that's national, but it's definitely.
We have them here in Florida. I don't know if it's everywhere.
Yeah. But. And so, we have an iconic sign, iconic building.
Yes.
And it is a landmark. If you're coming to my house, say, okay, take a right.
Yes.
Here at Dairy Queen. And I thought, and so I just Googled. A lot of people think I will go and I actually sit in front of the place and draw it. Well, not in February. And actually really never. I'm not that interested. I like to work from a photograph. So I actually just Googled Dairy Queen in Wallingford.
How fun.
Wallingford, Connecticut is where I live, and found a picture. Thank you, internet. And I used that to draw and put it into my collection. And then a couple months later, I thought, well, you know what? I think I'm going to share that in another group. I had shared it that day. But then I was like, let me share it on the Wallingford Community Forum.
Yes.
Which is what I did. I didn't really think anything of it. I didn't know what it was just a theme of the day that you could share something about your business or, the work that you do. So I shared the drawing and checked back later and there was all this buzz.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I love that place. This is where I went when I was a kid, blah, 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 on and on and on. And I thought, oh my goodness.
All because you shared your picture.
Right.
Yes.
So I was illustrating part of our life.
Yes.
In our town. And I thought, our town needs to be illustrated. And so from that point on, I think I ended up doing, I don't know, maybe 12 or 15 Wallingford landmarks. And I would share them each week to the Wallingford Forum and got great response. And then I started selling prints of them. And then that's where this drawing practice decided it really wanted to become a business.
Yes.
So pretty interesting. And it, and it was kind of just this kind of flirtation, so then people would see my work and they'd say, oh, do you want to be part of this artisan market? Okay, yeah, sure. I'll do that. How does that? Okay. So how do I figure that out? And it was just this really fun, just take the next right step kind of thing.
Yes.
Instead of thinking, okay, let me map out this strategic plan of how I'm going to get my art into the world and then people are going to want it. And it was really through just a dedication of sharing something every day and really listening to what I enjoyed doing and then also how people were responding to the art.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it started. So then I've started drawing other towns. Very exciting. And that's kind of brought me into where I am right now, doing a lot of work in New Haven. And there's so much history and amazing buildings. I love to draw signs. I love to draw bricks. So, so that's,
you're in the right place in New England.
And so I kind of tested the waters again with this sort of little formula that I've come up with. I did a few New Haven drawings and a friend of mine was putting together an artisan market in New Haven. And I said, oh, yeah, I'd like to join you. And so she had me come and started to display my new prints of the New Haven series. And again, those conversations started to build and talking with people. Oh, have you drawn this one? Or, oh, I used to go there when I was a kid. Or, one woman even started to have kind of tears come into her eyes because she just was overwhelmed with the place that it was taking her. And it's usually, it's always a good place, it seems.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes. Really, really cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So as this process has evolved for you, do you ever stop yourself from looking at it from that strategic point of view?
I think that, I think that's when things started to get a little muddied. I got a little confused, you start to, you enter into the realm of business.
Yes.
And there are things that you need to do, getting a tax ID and like all that kind of stuff, and like learning about contracts and, how do you set up an online shop? And then,
how do you even get your things printed?
Right. I mean, you would have thought my life depended on that decision. Because it was like, I just had no idea and I didn't know the right questions to ask.
Yes.
And so that's where I got really jammed up.
Where did you go to find support for that?
Well, I mean, honestly, my stepfather gifted me, he's an amateur photographer. Well, he calls himself that. He's very talented. And he had a printer that he was no longer using, and he wondered if I wanted it.
And it was a high-end printer.
A photo printer, yep. And then one of my husband's customers happened to be someone who could work on printers. So he got it up and running. It still was a slow, And then came the decision of, oh my gosh,
what kind of paper?
What kind of, exactly. Oh.
Been there.
Because paper's expensive.
Yes. And the style of your drawing, the way it appears is going to be different on different kinds of paper.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it is I've talked a lot about the drawing, but I actually watercolor these drawings in.
Yes.
And so they're very colorful, and you just don't know how that's going to, and then the paper, so you buy a box of 8x10 watercolor rag type paper. And you're like, okay, that's $25.
Yeah.
I don't feel super experimental. I mean, I suppose you can buy little packets of sample things, but then I feel like I'm getting too into the details of it all. I just don't like
and then
to,
it's not
fun.
So,
that's an interesting question, because so how do I get myself out of that? I think it's permission to fail. Yes, absolutely. The same permission I give myself when I do a drawing in ink.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, it's permission to fail.
And so are you still printing your cards yourself?
So I print I do prints and then I sign them. I have the note cards and postcards printed at a local printer.
Oh, good. That's nice.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that I talk to are like, oh, you have to try doing it through an online source, which, would probably be good. But again, I come to that hurdle. It's like, I don't like to just I don't really want to explore that. I don't know why that is. I mean, it might make my life easier, but right now it feels like it doesn't. So.
Yeah. And giving yourself permission to be okay with that seems to be a recipe that's working for you, or a formula that's working. Yeah. And I think something you said to me earlier, we might not have been recording then, because we had a whole conversation that we should have recorded.
Yes. I know. It's going to be the Nanette and Amy show.
Yes, right. Something that Amy said earlier about really feeling most comfortable in an in-person environment.
Absolutely.
And not loving online remote conversations. And I think it's important. It's an important point to highlight here, because for so many of us, we start to feel like there's something wrong with us if we don't want to play in all of these technology spaces.
Right.
And I know I have conversations with clients all the time about social media in particular. If it's overwhelming and it doesn't feel good, and you can't manage being in 6 different sites, nobody says you have to.
Right.
There are plenty of artists in the world who aren't doing it that way.
Right.
And it's really, I think what's so enlightening about listening to you is that very early on in the process for you, you were giving yourself permission to do this your own way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's so key to long-term success. And I hesitate with the word success because now we have to have a whole conversation about what success means.
Right.
But the long-term fulfillment, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
from this thing that was something you did for yourself for pleasure that has now become a business and has the potential to go lots of places.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's talk a little bit about what doors have opened for you since you did that drawing challenge back in 2017, I guess you said. So we're a couple years in now.
Right.
And I imagine that those conversations with people who have seen your work have taken you to places you wouldn't have expected.
Absolutely. So, I started saying yes to a lot of different things, different markets. There's a thing that we do in New Haven called Citywide Open Studios. And I was asked to participate in the alternative space. And there was, I think over 200 artists in that space. And it's just like, wow. I mean, it's so interesting to just go to a place where everybody's sort of operating from the same sort of like artist headspace, which is so rare.
Yes.
Unless you're like in art school or someplace like that. It's an unusual experience.
Yeah.
And then met some interesting people there. Started working on some different projects with my art. And the thing that kind of has emerged for me is through my own question about the business of art and seeing how I don't think you can really go to business school to learn the business of art. And I don't think that you can really go to art school to learn the business of art. And so there's this interesting place that's intersecting for me. And because I would like to scale this business that's, come to me, how do I do that? And, having conversations with professional people that are friendly to the arts that can also help me, like lawyers and, folks like that you don't usually run into in my little artsy world.
Yes.
And, finding ways to have those conversations and finding a language that we both understand. That's really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So that's what's really come of it.
Okay.
And I think, going back to the question that you had asked before, when you said, how did you say, how are you kind of handling like the business aspect of, or, having to, I don't even remember how you said it.
I think it was in that transition space of moving from playing at this Create Every Day to now having a business that is
so
about
there's
it.
Sort of a demand.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that Elizabeth Gilbert had said in her book, Big Magic, something about she would never ask her creativity to be the thing that makes money for her.
Yes.
And I was like, yeah. That was, that was that book. I was just like, I feel like I could have wrote this. Like, this was like, it was so much a part of my experience as being a creative person. And so what I've recently been doing is I found through some friendly connections I have, a woman, her name is Bria Lucky, and she has an artist studio, and she has an art therapy sort of bend to the work that she does. And so she facilitates an art group.
Nice.
And it's all process oriented. So it's not about product, which I love. Because before I was doing my illustration style, that's what I was doing.
Yes.
I was making these just, playing with paint and making jelly prints and, just seeing where that took me and cutting things and collaging things, just very expressive. And not that, I would share them sometimes and people are like, oh, the colors are pretty. Because it was just very personal to me.
Right.
And it just,
Yes, I know I do a lot of that. And I've been in the space of art journaling right now, which is something I had avoided for a long time because I imagined this big mess that I had to make this happen. And it turns out that it doesn't have to be true. And once I got past that, I could really enjoy the process.
Yeah.
And it's a very personal process. And sometimes the end result is something that feels like there could be value to others. You know, they might enjoy it. And sometimes, and I do catch myself in the space of, well, how might I convert this to be something that has commercial appeal if this is a style and a process that I really enjoy? Because there certainly are people who have done that in the world quite successfully.
Sure.
And at the same time, it starts to feel forced, right? It's somehow, so I'm going to try to make this have a commercial appeal. Wait a minute, that wasn't what was intended.
Right. I mean, because it really is, it's sort of an issue of consent with the art, right?
Ah, yes.
You're forcing this.
Yes.
Which is like, it can be painful to, when you start to try to cram this process into a place that it doesn't want to go. Because I really feel that the art flows through me, as cliche as that sounds. It's something that flows through me that I'm drawn to do. And I think that, yes, I can draw your house if you want me to. And I'm delighted to do that. If, you know, someone wants to pay me to do that, I am happy to do that. That comes from a different place.
Yes.
Than if I say, oh, I just want to draw this chair, you know, it's just
a different, or the keys that fell in the hole.
Right. It's just a different place that it comes from. And I think that doing this process or art therapy workshop, I go once a week, and it's with a group of women. It's called MOS, Mom's Open Studio Series.
Nice.
And we're there for 3 hours, which is awesome.
Yes.
So still not enough time.
I know.
And I you know, and I think that kind of releases that valve for me.
Nice.
So that I'm able to just I just recently discovered a new doodle. Which is very exciting.
Yeah.
Because I've always just been drawing these circles, which I always am delighted to do. But now there's these other things that are coming up in my doodles.
Nice.
And they have some more structure to them that didn't used to be there. And so to me, that's like pointing to something that's just sort of just on the horizon. So that's exciting, and kind of seeing how that's building in me. I'm really involved with the Creative Arts Workshop in New Haven. I'm actually a board member there, and we're really working on building a creative ecosystem.
Nice.
And we really believe to create fully, or how do we say it? We just want to create a space where people can come and just feel free to create.
Yeah.
And experience those serendipitous things that happen when you
do it.
Allow yourself to create.
Yeah.
And we really envision our space being a place where you don't need to see yourself as an artist to come in and do that.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's, thank you so much for sharing that, because that's near and dear to my heart. This idea that this definition of I'm creative or I'm not creative is not serving on lots of levels.
Right.
And my intention is to, through the workshops that I facilitate, to simply create an opportunity for you to get your hands in it.
Yes.
And to see what happens. See
what pops off the page. See what happens when you're molding that clay. And I think that's what I love about the jelly prints, is that you really have no control. You lay out the paint, you put the paper on, and it's always a surprise.
Yes.
You lift it up and you're like, that wasn't what I was expecting. I mean, I knew it was going to be green and it was going to have orange because those are the colors I put on there, but I didn't know how they were going to
be this or that.
And I think that I'm really drawn to art forms that kind of what's the word? They limit me in that way. They limit that part of my mind.
Okay.
I like that.
Okay.
I like limited tools. I like limited, I like to feel like I'm not really in control, because that's the access into that real creative space.
Interesting.
And when I start to feel like I'm really in control, it's like I've mastered it or something. And it's kind of boring to me.
Yes. Yes.
So.
And I wish you just triggered a memory for me, something I read this week, and I'm not going to remember where it came from. And I'm going to have to go look it up so I can put it in the show notes for everybody. But almost those words exactly, that this, whoever the author was speaking to that place of mastery, becoming boredom, and then so always wanting to be in the place of being an amateur.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I think that, somehow I made it through. I went to art high school. I went to, I had an interesting journey through college, but ended up with a degree in painting. But somehow I never got to the point. I always felt like I could stay in that amateur space.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad for that. I used to kind of feel a little embarrassed that I didn't have this perfect, presentable degree, or this, that I wasn't this artist who, follows this artist and likes to go to galleries and do all these things. I really don't enjoy doing that. As I don't know all the artists' names, or I just I like art history, but I don't want to memorize all of it.
Right.
That doesn't define me as an artist, right?
Yes.
And used to feel a little self-conscious about that.
That you couldn't hang with the artists at the cocktail party.
Right. Or when people would find out that, oh, you went to art school. Oh, where did you go? Well, okay. Just sort of sense their disappointment, because it just was sort of this out of the box education that I cobbled, together for myself. So, but now at this point in my life, I realize, oh yeah, that was a gift, because I was probably saying, don't put those parameters on me. Yeah.
That somehow you're the great creator, as Julia Cameron would call it, was saying that's not what you needed.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when you need inspiration, where do you go?
Well, I really love beauty. So to me, beauty is in all kinds of places. A lot of times it's just getting out, going for a walk, laughter, really talking with good friends, just sort of gets me out of my head. I like to look at pictures online. I like to look at magazines. Sometimes I just like to go shopping and just, go through the store and put some things in my cart because I like the colors and just see the color story that is, interesting to me. Not even that I'm going to buy those things,
right?
But just to see I really like this. It's sort of I call it bonding. I just bond with it while I, push the cart to the store. And then this is a TJ.
That's what I was doing.
This is a TJ Maxx experience. Yeah. So, but put those things in the cart and just see, what's exciting me. And so I think, and it's great to have an iPhone. I'm snapping photos and I can always look back over my own photos.
Yes.
I'm always cataloging different ideas.
Nice.
Yeah, but I think through conversation too.
I think that's interesting that the conversation leads to a visual art experience. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's it almost just gets the wheels turning, because I do draw and create very quickly when it comes to pen to paper or watercolor brush to paper.
Yes.
But there's also this period of time before that that is part of the process.
Okay.
And so it is sort of this little walkabout that I have to do that will include conversations, looking at different things from different angles, paying attention to wow, I really like the label of that Nutella jar, or, just like, I like the style of that. Oh, I wonder why I like it so much, or, just that kind of thing.
Yes. Interesting.
That will lead me. I'm like, I recently just actually did a drawing of a Nutella jar, because I was online looking at, one of my friends' feed, and he has a communication business where he does a lot of video making, and he did a little informational video about the history of Nutella.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh yeah, I love Nutella.
Yes.
And then I learned that little bit, and then I had gone to a party, and I was talking to some friends, and they had Nutella there, and I said, oh, did you know the history of Nutella?
Yes.
And so like it starts to create this. Yes. Oh yeah, and then the label is great. Okay, I have to draw it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very fun.
So that's kind of how it sets up for me.
I love that description you just shared of the walkabout that has to happen before the drawing.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting because that's very different than a painter's process where they might start with putting a background down, or in art journaling,
right?
We start with where all of these layers start with a background, and then the background informs, and then you add something else, and that informs, and then you add something else, and that informs. It's a very different process.
Well, but in a way, it is sort of a walkabout.
Yes.
It's just, it's just in a very small.
Yeah. And that walkabout though is happening with the hands-on process, where your walkabout is happening with all of these other inspirations before pen and paintbrush hit the paper, which I think is really fascinating, because I've worked with artists that are 80% finished with 25 paintings, never in that place of feeling like they've put the last piece of paint on or put the last, and there are all kinds of reasons for that, and everybody's are very unique. But it's interesting to me that your process is fairly contained. I don't hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't hear you saying you go back to touch this up later.
No.
Yeah. Talk about that.
I don't.
Yeah, talk about that.
That's just like, oh, that would just be death to me. I just can't.
And that's very different than a lot of people that I talk to who are in that place of, well, if I just add this little more light here, or I just add this little bauble here, or I just do this there one more time, let me circle back. And not, there's no right or wrong to this conversation, but I think that was interesting, your response. No, touch up.
Please, no, don't make me do it. I think that was, I think that was probably hard, being in college, because, you would have these sort of projects.
And you get critique and they'd send you back.
And it's, for me, it's hard to drop back in. It's like, it's just these little relationships, and then poop, and then it's done, so it's like on to the next thing.
Interesting.
So I guess I'm a serial
drawer. And I love this because there's what's coming up for me is in my own process. One of the things that when I, for a while I was doodling, I have a pad where I was doing a circular mandala doodle of some kind, not every day, not 300 days, but with some regularity. And at some point I came to the conclusion that these would be more appealing if I use some sort of a pattern to draw the original circles.
Okay.
Because when I draw them freehand, they're wobbly. They're not, they're not perfect circles. So I concluded that I could use a CD and that would be the right size, and I would use that. And along with that process came this idea that somehow these weren't, quote unquote, finished enough to be marketable. Right? The idea that these doodles, the freehand ones in particular, because they were a little wobbly and a little wonky, and I do them quickly and I'm not really paying attention to, am I in the lines or I'm not in the lines? And it's just my process. And when it's done, and that's it. And so your conversation, it's really bringing home for me this challenge I was having. And quite frankly, where I am in that process is I haven't done them in a while.
Huh, interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And the clear I haven't done them in a while is because I came up to that space of, okay, so now that you're doing these and have been doing them for a while, how are you going to claim them? What are they going to be? Are they going to become cards? Are they going to inframe a collection? Are they going to do, all of that? Right.
Right.
Oh, and if they are, then you better pay a little more attention to the detail. Right.
I know. Becomes sort of like,
and then like, ugh.
Yeah.
I don't wanna.
You can't make me. Yeah. I don't know. Like as you're telling me about them, and because I think you did send me a note card with a hand drawn.
I probably
and
did.
It wasn't made with a CD.
No,
it was wobbly, as you say. I didn't think that when I looked at it. And to me, I think another part of my process that I didn't share was once and it might have been implied, but once I draw the drawings, I make a digital copy of them immediately. Yeah. And there's something about putting the drawing up onto the computer screen. It becomes backlit. Yes. And it sort of changes my experience. It's yet another experience of this relationship. And I think that is a nice way to gain a little distance from it and sort of think about, what else could this be? Yeah. And it kind of informs me. It's not like I'm saying, okay, you're going to be this. It's more like, oh, what else do you want to be? Yeah. And so I was thinking, and as you were talking about that drawing, I thought, I wonder what would happen if maybe you have what if you did scan them and put them up there? And I don't know, to me, I would make them into stickers, but that's just me.
I did make some into stickers.
Oh, good.
Yes, I did.
See, you already knew.
I did make some into stickers. And they were really great stickers. They've been really fun stickers. Yeah. So that's been fun. But it is, I love that you shared this idea that you are asking the drawing what it wants to be. Right. Asking the drawing what it wants to be. One of my early guests on the show, she does some beading. And she said she starts her process with the stones and asks them what they want to be. Right. What do you want to be? Yeah. And that becomes what starts her process. Yeah. So, and I think, we're only in certain circles do I hear that kind of conversation where we allow these inanimate objects to have an identity that we're willing to communicate with. Right. I think, and so many of the photos I've always taken, like when I travel, are always of inanimate objects. Like and then even my interior design background that that was how I worked creatively for many years. Yes. And just, having talks with furniture and colors and how do they want to be together and how do they want to support people in their environment. And I think that to me, it's the only way. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Because it's fun for me. That's fun for me. That's where the fun is, and just listening. And I think what also is really nice about it is that I'm then not really attached to what it decides it wants to become. Yes. So it's easy then for me to reproduce it or sell it. Or if I'm helping someone with an interior design project and they don't like the idea that I've come up with. Yeah. Okay. Right. Like it's not it's not me. Yes. It's just this thing that's flown through me. Yeah. So I think that able to let go and detach. Important. Absolutely. So important in every aspect of life. Oh, right? Absolutely. Yes. So, and I think that's another way that, like, thinking back to the conversation we were having about Creative Arts Workshop and inviting folks to come over that don't necessarily see themselves as artists, but they want to be creative. That's a wonderful skill that us artists have, I think, is just being able to just let that go. Yeah. Yeah. And not be attached to things in that way. Yeah. Yeah. And it comes through the practice. Right? Absolutely. Of allowing yourself to be okay with, I don't really like this drawing today. Yeah. Trust. Right? I mean, it really is trusting it. And
it's a wonderful thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that place of knowing that tomorrow you have another opportunity to do it again. Right. And not being knowing, and I think Elizabeth Gilbert in her book really identified this also, the idea that this isn't the one and only, right?
Right.
Right. It's not the one and only inspiration you will ever have.
Yes.
There will be many.
So true.
And our job is to keep the channel open.
Absolutely.
Right?
That is. I think that's so much of it. And even like, some of when I have facilitated workshops, and, when I've done the jelly printing, help people with that process, it really is more about me guarding the door.
Yes. Yes. I love that.
It's like, I'll guard the door, you do your thing. And I do that for myself too.
Yes.
I think that's one of the things I do best as an artist, really.
Holding the safe space and just saying, here within these walls, or whatever that definition is,
absolutely,
we are going to allow you to do and be whatever you want to do and be. And it's all going to be okay. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
It's all going to be okay.
Right.
Because the worst that can happen is you tear it up and throw it away.
Right. And I think that, and that's the other thing that I would love when I would facilitate, and even in my own process, it's like when I start to feel like I'm sort of protecting this one part of the paper, to me, that is the sign. You have to destroy that part.
Yeah.
Or you have to cover it up, or
use it,
tear it, reapply it somewhere else. That's the entry point. That's the invitation.
Interesting.
So that is
interesting.
To me, that's
the
magic.
Place that you're protecting is the place that's calling for destruction.
Yeah, disruption, change.
Disruption,
right?
Disruption.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I know destruction feels heavy,
yeah,
but it's but that disruption. That's where it's like it teeters on.
Interesting. And then in the disruption, that's where the magic happens, right? Yeah.
Because you're disoriented. And when you're disoriented, you don't do the things you always do.
Yes.
And that's why it's important to travel. And that's why it's important to move your furniture around.
Yes.
And that's why it's important to put your socks in a different drawer.
Yes.
I don't know, do you guys have socks in Florida? But
no, we don't. Yeah. After 35 years I lived here, no.
Good for you.
It's so funny. Whenever I go north for any more than a day or two, I'm like, oh,
socks.
I don't have enough socks.
Yes, socks are a real thing.
Socks.
Yeah. So
yeah, we don't have socks. No. Yeah, funny. Just interesting that and so there's this juxtaposition, isn't there, of the beauty of the practice and the ritual, and then this flip side, which is the shake it up.
Yeah.
Right. And in the practice, we're in the practice of shaking it up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it is. It definitely is it's a dance, so it really comes back to just paying attention to yourself and what it is that you need. Yeah.
And if that is pause for a while, it's pause for a while. Or if it is do 7 days of drawings in one day, then that's what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And particularly, and I think that's the other thing that the practice gives us, right? And you alluded to this in the beginning, that when you started this journey of the 365 challenge, you learned so much about yourself, your process, what you liked, what you didn't like. And I think that's such an important piece to allow ourselves to be the observer.
Right. And I feel like at this stage in my life, that's really a place I've been hanging out, is just sort of the witness, the observer of all kinds of things. Yeah. And it's like, okay, there's an intelligence at play here. There's something that is leading, and I think to honor that in myself, then I'm able to honor that in other people.
Yes.
And then through that, I've all of a sudden, started these wonderful new relationships and people that are, kind of diving in the same way.
Yeah.
And there's just so many more conversations to have.
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it's like, it's just exciting. You wake up each day, okay, what's going to happen today?
Yes.
And then the moms group that I paint with, I mean, we just have so much fun in there.
Yeah, that's great.
It's like going back to being in kindergarten in a way,
Mm-hmm.
or sometimes your 12-year-old self where,
Yes.
you're just so silly and, the jokes are off color. And it's just
and
fun.
It's freeing and fun. And in that space,
yeah,
do and be whatever you want.
Right. Yes.
And it's safe and and it allows this next expression of you, whatever that's going to be.
Yeah.
In my workshops, we talk a lot about happy accidents.
Absolutely.
And oops, the white paint just blurted out all over. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's next?
And you can really practice that language, I think, which is something I would love to carry more into my, other parts of my life. Like, oh, that accident just happened. I wonder what would happen if we did this instead of you should do this, or, that's changing that language definitely brings that joy and laughter and, serendipity back into, my everyday mundane, got to make the dinner, do the laundry life,
Right. And what if we didn't have the same chicken recipe we have all the time? And, now we have a new opportunity to do something else. And it's, earlier, I think this is a good opportunity for us to bring back one of the conversations we had earlier, which was about how coming of age, we are often taught that everything is a choice between one thing or another.
Right.
And then we also get taught that one of those choices is right and one of those choices is wrong, which is a whole nother part of the conversation. But what we were sharing with each other earlier is around this idea that what if it was a both and world?
Yeah.
Right? What if, and I think this notion that we can try on different things in this how the creative process then starts to bleed out into the rest of our lives, right? Where we have built that muscle, that trust muscle you spoke of, that says, okay, we're confident now enough that if these happy accidents happen, that I can manage some new thing. It might not be exactly what I thought it was going to be, but it's not going to be the end of the world. And I can trust that that's going to be true, or whatever it is, I'm going to be able to move to whatever the next thing is. And as that starts to spill over, for me, what then became the next growth place was this knowing that, oh, so if I'm allowing this thing to spill over and to trust that if this choice that I made isn't really working out the way that I thought it might, or that I'm feeling and sensing in my higher self that this is not the direction I want to go, that there's this opportunity to make a new choice, and to consider that. And the big eye opener for me was I could make a new choice that might actually be to go back to the one that I left, which in my old way of being would never have happened. No, because if I had used all of my intellect to make the choice to go to the right, there was no way I could go back, at least to the left choice that I had.
Right. But maybe it's just a circle.
Right. Exactly.
And then you come back to that first choice with a new lens. And I think that it's the walkabout, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that's the beauty of being in touch with this part of ourselves. Right. It enables us to be okay with the walkabout.
Yeah. I mean, even just taking this trip, my daughter and I flew down here.
Yeah.
She's just 12, so I'm still, needing to be very responsible for her. But she's also at an age where, I don't need to watch her,
every second.
It's not like I'm traveling with a 5-year-old. But, traveling will really bring that out, and you think, but, I have noticed that I'm a much easier traveler now because I say, well, you know what? I might miss the flight, or I might not know where I am, or I might not, be able to get a taxi right away, or, whatever that is, or I might not get a great dinner tonight. I might end up eating, something that I don't really like.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And, I might have
Yeah.
an experience that is extraordinary.
Right. I might find a restaurant that, blows my socks off because I didn't know what to expect because I took a wrong turn or, whatever.
Yes.
I think that, yes, it's both and, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that is a wonderful place to be, not feeling like I have to curate and control all of the outcomes, because it's really hard to vacation and go to that flow space if you are trying to manipulate every detail. Yeah.
Totally different experience.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's interesting that you telling that story reminds me so much of how different I am in the way that I move through those kinds of experiences now. Yeah. It just last week I traveled and I realized late in the process that I had booked a connecting flight that had a very short window. And my old self would have been flipping out on the phone, trying to make choices, before I even had a problem, right? All assuming that I was going to have a problem.
Trying to prevent a crisis, right?
That didn't even happen yet.
Yeah.
And I realized, just being in that witness place, that observation place, that I very calmly said, okay, so I'm going to be in Atlanta. It's the middle of the day. If you know anything about Atlanta and South Florida, there are hundreds of possible alternatives.
Right. Totally.
To get on another flight and get home before the end of the day.
Yeah.
If I miss my flight.
Yeah.
Not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to note how easily that process came for me now. And, 15, 20 years ago, what just a chaotic, crazy mess that would have been.
Yeah, it would have been. It would have been a concerted effort for me to even get myself to release the reins for like that. This could work out. Right. Yeah, I'd be completely consumed by the absolute knowing that this was not going to work. Right.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. One of the things I challenge myself with is how do we communicate? And that's part of the reason for this podcast, right? How do we communicate to those people who are still where we were back then? One, that there is a light outside of this chaotic, crazy mess that you're living and this insane level of stress that you put yourself under on a regular basis. And that for us, the pathway has been through this practice of creating whatever that looks like. And it doesn't have to be illustrations or doodles or art journaling. It can be cooking or music or dance or gardening for that matter. It can be knitting. It can be anything. Whatever that outlet is that continues to offer you the opportunity to test your willingness to keep moving through, right? Whatever the process looks like. Yeah. The other day I almost caught my kitchen on fire with steak had a little too much fat on it, and the broiler was a little too close to the. It's like, oops. And we still had dinner. It turned out okay. I didn't panic. We, got the fire out. It was all okay.
I mean, I think it's that idea of like the survival brain.
Yes.
When we drop into that place, we just don't make good decisions. We just don't.
Yeah. And when we're operating in this space of being, knowing what flow feels like, I think that's the other thing, is that we have to get to the creative practice to know what flow feels like.
Right.
And once we have that first experience, for me, immediately the light bulb went on that said, I need more of that.
Right. Yeah, you realize there's this deficit, this gaping hole.
Yes.
that you didn't even know was there.
Right.
Oh yeah, let's do more of that.
Right. And then you
Yeah.
start to see the difference between that other place that's stressed and chaos and everything's harder than it has to be, and what flow feels like. And then the more you have those flow experiences, the more you start to say, this is not necessary in my world.
Yeah.
And boy, if I wear that witness and observer hat a little bit and I watch what's happening over there, I can start to see that there are ways that that doesn't have to be true.
Right.
And then I start to notice periodically when I drag some of that old way of being over into my creative space, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, but very quickly, my creative space isn't having any of it.
See ya.
Yeah. And that's all part of that like getting to know, getting to know your own signals, getting to, I think you alluded to being in touch with yourself. This idea that giving yourself permission to do things in a particular way, that and sensing what feels good, and then inviting the practice and the creative output itself to contribute, and the materials to contribute in some way. So fascinating. All good stuff.
Absolutely.
So it feels like we could do this forever.
Certainly. Maybe we'll do it again.
Yes, we will.
Yeah. And I hear you come north sometimes.
I
Maybe.
Yeah, we might have to just figure out a way to hook up in
person
again.
I would, if you're ever in Connecticut, I'd love to invite you to a Creative Arts Workshop.
Oh, I would love to see that. Yeah,
I'm
really a big fan of those kinds of spaces. I'm a member here of a new arts incubator space.
Oh, cool.
And in Delray.
What's that called?
It is called the Arts Warehouse.
The Arts Warehouse.
Yeah,
I'm
gonna have to I'm tripping over it because there's also an arts garage in Delray.
Fun.
And I had been a member for a while in Fort Lauderdale. There's a group called Art Serve.
Oh.
And Art Serve actually has a really great program every year in June that is about the business of art.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and they've been doing that for a while. And they bring a facilitator in, and they do, I think it's 4 Saturdays in June. You do the whole day. And
so I have to come down here for a month, is what you're saying?
Yes,
okay.
You could, yeah. And it's a really interesting program. I have not done it myself because I always had something else going on in June that was conflict. And I know a number of people who have done it, and we're really, really happy that they did.
That's really cool. Yeah.
And you know what? It's possible. I will try to find the information about that, because you might be able to invite the people who do it in Fort Lauderdale to your
You
space.
read my mind.
Yes.
Yeah. Because that's what I want. I want to build these highways. I want to, I've been really great about building community in my local area. And it's like, okay, and now and more. Let's just,
connect the space, connect the dots, and people can travel and share and be.
Totally. Let's use what we have.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
It would be interesting, that I don't know that exists yet in the creative arts space, where the co-working spaces have been doing it for a while, where you almost like a country club, or the
like a reciprocal
gym,
sort of,
where they have reciprocals, and I've never heard of that in the creative arts space.
So many people in the Northeast travel to Florida, and so to have that
would be super cool.
Because, talking about practice.
Yes.
When you do travel, and if you are, having an extended stay somewhere, it's hard to create that space.
Yes.
So to have a place that you can go and that's going to be provided.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
We're onto something.
I think that's interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And just this notion of the connection and the continuing to drop seeds, I think,
and
the sharing that comes from that,
Yeah.
and the everything just continues to evolve through that experience.
Yeah. Well, I'll definitely have to start following those different institutions and start.
Yes. And I will reference all of them in the show notes for everybody. So
Super.
I welcome anybody who's listening. If you are part of one of these incubators or art spaces in another community, please do share with us over on the Conscious Creators page on Facebook. And I'll put a little invitation for that on the show notes too, because that's the kind of conversation I would love to see us have. To continue to spark creative energy across the globe, right? And to connect us to have those shared experiences. So
cool.
Yeah, very cool. So before we wrap up, share with us how people can find you and see your time lapse and your illustrations and where you might be hanging out next and all of that good stuff.
So I share a lot on Instagram. And my handle is at Amos, AMOS, Catfish, CATFISH. And then I usually shoot any of that content over to my Facebook business page, which is at Amy Artist Design. I also have a website. It is www.amymcnamara.space. And what else? I have a newsletter. What else am I doing? And I've recently been hanging out on LinkedIn.
Cool.
So you can find me on there. It's like all of a sudden I'm posting some time-lapse videos there and I'm having some interesting conversations. But there's that business of art conversation that wants to be had.
Yes.
So it makes it's no surprise to me that it's happening. Because I've had my LinkedIn account for years and I thought, wow, this is cool. Yeah. But all of a sudden I'm like,
there's some interesting stuff going on over there.
You can find me there under my name, Amy McNamara. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I will look forward to us doing this again.
Yes, for sure.
And continuing the conversation and the dialogue about all things creative.
Yeah.
Any last words before we sign off?
No, I can't think of anything. This has been all encompassing and
very fun.
Very fun. The best thing to do on vacation, right?
Absolutely. Yes. I love to have these opportunities to connect that really are unexpected, right?
Yeah.
And we couldn't have planned this any better, right?
No.
Yeah. And that's where all of that serendipity in life and our creative process leads us. So
and interesting, when we did the workshop with Stella,
we
went on a little walk.
We did as part of our self-care. Yes.
So
here we are talking about Walkabout.
Cheers to the Walkabout. That's what we'll end on.
Yes, absolutely. Love that. Cheers to the Walkabout. So with that, I will sign off. We are closing. Amy McNamara and Nanette Saylor from the Create, Play, Live podcast, where we let curiosity lead us to extraordinary lives. So bye for now, folks. Stay curious, my friends.
Yay, bye.
You are listening to the Create, Play, Live show, where women come together to share how curiosity and creativity lead them to extraordinary lives. I'm your host, Nanette Saylor, and I'm honored to share the mic with some truly amazing women who have asked and answered the question, what if we stop adulting and live every day with the curiosity of a child at play? In these enlightening conversations, we'll invite you to let go of outdated standards, make your own rules, and give yourself permission to play more than ever before. You have the power to create your life. Spend some time with us and you'll learn to see life through new eyes and challenge yourself to new possibilities. We may not solve the world's problems, but we will get you to think differently about your own. Come play with us. Listen and subscribe at createplaylive.com.